The protagonist of the film is a 23-year-old woman named Noah, who is desperate to find a boyfriend. She uses online dating sites and has gone on dates with several men, but all of them have been disappointing. During one of these dates, she meets a man named Chadwick, who turns out to be a complete jerk. He makes misogynistic remarks and talks about his money. He also makes it clear that Noah will be paying for their dinner. As their conversation unfolds, Noah becomes increasingly irritated, and she decides to leave, but Chadwick ensures to make a few mean comments about her. He calls her a disappointment who wasted his precious time. Noah, not used to such disappointment, says nothing and just leaves. Later at the gym, she tells her best friend, Molly, about the incident. She believes she'll be single for the rest of her life. However, Molly assures her that God has the best man in store for her. That would mean God keeps a lot of guys chained up somewhere. At night, Noah goes to a nearby supermarket, where she bumps into a man named Steve. The two quickly bond over their shared love for cotton candy, and Noah seems charmed by his charisma. Before parting ways, Steve suddenly asks for her number. Being the desperate girl that Noah is, she gives it to him without any hesitation. The next day, she talks to her best friend, Molly, about Steve. Noah mentions that he's a handsome guy with a good personality, but is sad that he hasn't messaged her yet. In response, Molly jokes that he's probably married. Later, when Noah is on her way home, she finally receives a call from Steve, wasting no time and asking her out on a date. Noah is surprised by the sudden request, but is so desperate that she agrees without much thought. She knows this guy has a big catch, and during their date, Noah opens up and shares about their past. He reveals that he's actually a surgeon from Texas and is new in town. In turn, Noah mentions that she just graduated from college and is looking for a job. The two bond over the fact that they both have no parents and live on their own. Steve also mentions that he is so focused on his work that he has no time for social media. After their date, Noah invites him to her apartment. Things heat up there, and the two end up having a romantic time. The next morning, Noah wakes up feeling refreshed. She hasn't been this happy in a long time. She secretly takes a picture of Steve asleep and then calls her best friend, Molly, to share the details of her fantastic night. Molly is happy for her but finds it strange that Steve isn't on the internet. As their conversation unfolds, Noah mentions that Molly's ex-boyfriend, Paul, was working as a bartender at the restaurant last night. It is revealed that Molly recently came out as a lesbian and broke up with Paul. The following night, Noah meets her new boyfriend again as they grab a bite to eat and discuss more about their lives. Noah mentions that she has a best friend named Molly who knows everything about her. After they finish eating, Steve suggests they dance. Noah is a bit hesitant but ends up having a lot of fun. Eventually, they get tired and sit down. Out of the blue, Steve asks Noah if she'd like to go on a weekend trip with him. She asks about the destination, but he keeps it a secret because where's the fun if everything isn't a mystery? However, she agrees because she's genuinely starting to like him. After Steve leaves, Noah calls her best friend and tells her about the upcoming trip. Molly is a bit worried since Noah is going out with someone she barely knows. Nevertheless, Noah assures her best friend that she'll be fine. She also sends her a picture of Steve, saying he's perfect. The next day, Steve picks up Noah and says they'll leave early in the morning the next day. Our innocent girl agrees, but she has no idea what awaits her. She tries to send messages to Molly about her location, but her phone signal seems to be weak. After driving for a few hours, they finally arrive at a secluded house that appears to be completely isolated from the rest of the town. Noah is a bit scared by this, but she doesn't say anything for the moment. After some time, Steve prepares a drink for her and hands it over. He asks her to guess the contents, but as soon as Noah tastes it, she feels dizzy and passes out. After regaining consciousness, she finds herself chained in a room with Steve. He confesses that he drugged her, leaving Noah feeling confused and terrified. Steve then drops a major bombshell. He's actually a cannibal who eats human flesh and also sells it to wealthy clients. He tells her that many of his clients prefer the meat of young women, so he tricks and kidnaps them, taking them to meetings. He also tells Noah that he intends to keep her alive for as long as possible to maintain the freshness of her flesh, while slowly removing parts of her body. Terrified for her life, Noah attempts to resist, but Steve restrains her and pins her to the ground. After the cannibal leaves, Noah desperately cries for help, and a woman from the adjacent room, named Penny, responds, revealing that Steve has kidnapped several women here. As the two women talk to each other, they discover that both of them are orphans. This means that Steve targets only women without parents, as he knows that no one will come looking for them. Just then, another woman starts singing, and Penny reveals that the other victim of Steve, named Melissa, has lost her mind after being abducted. On the other hand, Molly starts to worry after not hearing from her friend for a while. She sends a few messages, and surprisingly, Steve sends a message back, using Noah's phone. He mentions that he's relaxing in a cabin far away from the city. He also sends her a picture of a beautiful waterfall, and says that Noah plans to turn off her mobile phone for a while to disconnect from technology and enjoy nature. Molly, who knows her best friend quite well, feels that something isn't right. People don't usually say they like such things unless they're trying to create a fake version of themselves for dating apps. So, she searches for the image of the waterfall on the internet to find its location. It turns out to be a random picture taken from a random website. On the other hand, Steve approaches Noah again, but this time he's gentle, gives her some new clothes, and even lets her take a shower. Noah takes advantage of this kindness and attempts to escape, but unfortunately, Steve manages to capture her, then drags her to the operating room and removes her buttocks as punishment. "I can't help it, I'm a fan of buttocks," says Steve. Elsewhere, Molly begins her search for her best friend. She initially goes to the restaurant where her ex-boyfriend, Paul, had the first date with Noah. The two greet each other awkwardly, and Molly gets straight to the point. She asks Paul if he knows this guy Steve. The bartender seems a bit hesitant, as he's not allowed to share customer details, but with Molly insisting, he has no choice but to comply. Paul then reveals that the guy's real name is Brandon Kemp. Later, Molly goes back home and searches his name online. She finds out that he is married to a woman named Anne and has 2 children. After this, Molly decides to pay a visit to Anne. She also sends Paul his location, asking him to come and look for her if something goes wrong. Back at the butcher's, Noah learns that she's the only victim Steve has been intimate with. This means she might have a weak spot for her. Noah then decides to take advantage of this situation. From that moment on, she stops resisting and tries to seduce Steve at every chance she gets. She also shows a sudden interest in human flesh, saying she wants to taste it. In the next scene, Molly arrives at Anne's location and immediately reveals that her husband is meeting other women. The woman seems surprised by this revelation, so she invites Molly inside for a conversation. Unfortunately, as they delve deeper into their conversation, Steve suddenly appears, acting cool and pretending not to know anyone named Noah. This somewhat convinces Molly, and she thinks she entered the wrong house, but before leaving, she hands her friend another phone. To her surprise, the phone rings from Steve's pocket, revealing that he is, in fact, the kidnapper. However, why does he have her phone? Now that Steve has been exposed, he cunningly says that she shouldn't have been here. Molly tries to escape, but before she can do so, Anna knocks her down from behind. It turns out she is also a cannibal friend of Steve. In another scene, we see Anna in the bathroom, revealing that she has a prosthetic leg. This suggests that she was once one of Steve's victims before becoming his wife. During dinner, while Steve and Noah have a conversation almost like a couple, she asks how he got into this business. He tells her he first tasted human flesh when he was 18 years old. Initially, he was afraid of getting caught by the police, but then he couldn't get enough of that taste. As the years went by, he developed a craving for human flesh and made friends who shared the unusual taste. Eventually, he found a community willing to pay a lot of money for this rare meat. It's amazing what you can find on Facebook these days, turning it into a human meat trafficker. After sharing his story, Steve offers some human flesh to Noah. She is disgusted by it, but to maintain her facade, she eats it with a happy face. After dinner, Steve takes Molly for his horrific purposes. Meanwhile, Paul, who hasn't heard from his ex for a while, becomes worried and starts searching for her. Steve invites Noah to another dinner. She seems to have gained his trust so far, which becomes even more evident when he gives her a beautiful pink dress. Later, during dinner, while Noah nibbles on human flesh, Steve reveals that she is eating Melissa. This horrifies our girl, but she doesn't allow it to show on her face. After dinner, Steve shows her a hidden space filled with items from his victims, indicating that he has kidnapped and killed many women before. Then he reveals something disgusting: his clients actually like to have items from the women they eat, which makes them feel closer to their food. Just then, Noah spots Molly's phone in the corner. This makes her realize that her best friend had come to look for her but ended up becoming one of Steve's victims. Furious, Noah decides to take action right away. She knows Steve can change his behavior any day, so she needs to act quickly. Therefore, she gathers her courage and asks him for a dance. Surprisingly, he agrees and even dances with her. After setting the mood with a romantic dance, she leads him into his room under the pretense of giving him pleasure. However, instead of giving him a good time, she brutally bites his testicles. And then Noah quickly grabs the keys and escapes, while Steve writhes in pain. She soon reaches the compartment where the other victims are held. They all appear dead, except for Penny and her friend Molly. Noah quickly releases them, and the trio escapes, but Steve reappears out of nowhere. A tense struggle between the two parties follows, and despite being outnumbered and injured, Steve manages to overpower the women. However, he soon becomes tired and is taken down. The girls then take Molly's phone and get out of there, but they don't get too far as Penny seems to be missing a limb. Unfortunately, Steve reappears, this time with a gun in hand. He fires several rounds at them, but each one misses. Meanwhile, Paul has arrived outside the house just in time to die, probably following the GPS on Molly's phone. When he hears the gunshots, he immediately runs after them. The girls notice this and realize that help won't arrive anytime soon, so they decide to take matters into their own hands. They quickly form a plan and split up in different directions to confuse the cannibal, and when Steve pounces on one of them, all three girls gang up on him. Noah hands her a weapon, and they finish him off. After this, she tries to call for help using Molly's phone, but it suddenly stops working. After a while, Anna also arrives, looking for her husband. When she finds his lifeless body on the ground, she becomes furious and attacks Noah. The two women then go at each other, and it seems like Anna gains the upper hand, but fortunately, Molly arrives just in time and smashes the woman's head with a shovel. She does it repeatedly until Anna finally dies. In the final scene, as Molly and Noah try to make sense of what has happened, Noah receives a text from Chadwick. He asks her, "Have you woken up?"